Today and across the fence, bees and other pollinators. Pollinators are vital to our food supply, but their habitats are shrinking, and so are their numbers. New research at the University of Vermont is aimed at reducing that trend. Good afternoon and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Research at UVM is focusing on pollinators and perennial flowers. The project is looking to discover which perennial flowers we can plant in our home landscapes for the benefit of the pollinators. To find out more, I'm joined by UVM Extension horticulturalist Leonard Perry. Thanks so much for being with us, Leonard. And you brought a friend.
I did. Annie White is a graduate research assistant working with me, starting her third year now, and actually looking at pollinators and the effect of native plants species versus cultivars of those. Cultivars, just a cultivated variety of those. There's something that maybe someone bred or they either found maybe in a nursery, kind of a mutation, or maybe they just found out in the wild, maybe something the bees crossed and they found a different plant, different flower colors or whatever. So that's what Annie's looking at to see if, there is a difference between these pollinators.
Well, it's great to have you here, Annie. How did you become interested in this topic?
Well, prior to coming to UVM, I had a degree in landscape architecture and I was working as a landscape designer. And I became really interested in how plants and animals, and specifically pollinators, interact with each other. I was very interested in designing with native plants, but I found that there was actually very little scientific research out there that would support my plant selection decisions. So I figured someone really needed to research this topic, what plants were best for pollinators, if native cultivars were the same as true native plants. So I decided to take that challenge on, and I came to Vermont, which is where I grew up, so I was thrilled to come back. And working with Dr. Perry was a great match because he has a lot of experience researching perennial flowers.
So how do you know if a plant is native?
There's a lot of debate on how to define a native plant, but one of the most commonly accepted definitions is that a native plant is simply a plant that's existed and persisted in a natural landscape since prior to European settlement.
Okay, that kind of sums it up. Let's take a look at some of the plants that are being used in the research.
Okay, yeah, Annie and I took a little bit of time to try to figure out, and narrow it down to a manageable number. So it started out with 15 different species and cultivars of those. So take a look at those. The first being a New England aster, Aster novae anglii, and that's it's kind of a purpley color. Tall pollinators love it. And then there's a selection of that, Alma Potschke, which is one of those plants that went over to Europe and they selected a name like that. It's a German name, and we got it back here. So Annie mentioned she's actually finding some differences this fall on those. Of course, those bloom in the fall with the other asters. Then there's a common yarrow that blooms earlier in the summer, and then a selection of that. There's several new series. Seduction series is one. Very long bloom times, and this is strawberry seduction. So low plants, but very different colors as you saw before, not just a white, but many colors. So a cultivar of that. Coneflowers are very popular now. In fact, I've got over 100 in my own trials, different ones. And here's a typical purple coneflower, well named. But there are others, such as the new ones that are really frilly and double, which we're kind of wondering, will the pollinators like those as much as they do the standard one? And this is one that's been around a while, white swan. It's called purple coneflower, but it's not, it's white. So, but that's a standard cultivar that's been around a bit. Then there are the penstemons. More of a Midwest, you see those a lot, but you can see it's at 3 to 4 foot tall, just a species in her trials. And then here's Husker red penstemon, dark leaves Husker, Cornhusker state of Nebraska is where that one was selected. So similar plant, but just dark colored leaves. Spiderworts bloom early in the season and generally tend to be more purpley, but there's different colors like this one, the red grape spiderwort, kind of a reddish color. So just a few of the different plants that Annie selected and is looking at.
So why are these plants important for pollinators? Can't pollinators just get what they need from regular crops?
Well, there's just so many pollinators, and we'll just hit on a few of those. There are many types. A lot of these have evolved with native plants, so they really prefer or really need the native plants. And so that's one of the important things to have. A lot of our landscapes now that we plant don't have enough plants for pollinators. They may be all shrubs, all lawn. They really don't have the flowers. And even those flowers, a lot of them are sterile. Good examples, the pollenless sunflowers. that you get so you don't have pollen shedding on our tables when you cut them and bring them in, use them in arrangements. Well, that's, pollinators need pollen, obviously. So about 75% worldwide of all the flowering plant species really rely on pollinators. And Annie has a few more tips about why they're important in agriculture.
Yes, pollinators are extremely important in agriculture. About 70% of the food crop species that we enjoy require insect pollination. Right here in Vermont, we have a wide variety of fruits and vegetables that require insect pollination. Probably the biggest crop we have is our commercial apple production. We have about 3,000 acres in Vermont, and they do require insect pollination. So here we rely a large amount on the European honeybee, which is not a native species. It's been introduced through Europe. And as we know, the commercial honeybee industry has really been struggling in recent years. It's dealt with a lot of parasites and viruses and colony collapse disorder. And it's becoming very expensive and difficult for a lot of farmers to have the pollination services from the honeybee that they need. So we have all of these actual native pollinators that can perform the same services, but they also have been declining mostly due to habitat loss. So we feel that there's potentially a really good opportunity to restore some habitat for our native pollinators, increase their numbers, and be able to use them as sort of an insurance policy against any further decline in honeybees.
Yeah, I was going to say, when we think of pollinators, we almost always just think of the honeybee.
Right, right. So there's actually many different kinds of native bees out there in addition to honeybees. In the U.S. we have 4,000 species, which is really amazing. Here in Vermont we have about 275 species of native bees. Right, it's incredible.
Let's take a look at some of the pollinators that you're recording in your research and we should be aware of.
Okay, this is the European honeybee, very common sight throughout Vermont. This is on Culver's root, which is Veronicastrum virginicum. Mm-hmm. Here are a couple of different bumblebee species on sneezeweed, Helenium autumnale.
It sounds very enticing, bumblebees on sneezeweed.
And here's a bumblebee who's sort of stuffed up inside of a penstemon flower. Mm-hmm. And this is a green sweat bee, which is really fun to see. This is on an aster flower. And here's our monarch butterfly, which we love to see in the fall. This is on an aster again.
Mm-hmm. I should insert, I haven't seen any this year until now, and then I actually saw one the other day on that very aster, species aster. So obviously very attractive to
yes,
them.
Very important flower. And then of course there's other pollinators, including hummingbirds, which are really fun to see in our gardens, on a monarda. And this looks like a honeybee, but it's not. It's actually a drone fly, which can be a pollinator, but there's some interesting flies that impersonate bees and other wasps and things like that.
So why are you doing this research?
I'm doing the research because we feel that it's really important to better understand the differences between native plants and native cultivars, if there are differences, and how we can just improve plant selection for pollinator habitat restoration and potentially bring some of these native pollinators back into our landscapes.
And so where's the research taking place?
It's taking place on a few different farms here in Vermont. I have a SARE partnership research grant, and my two farms, one is at Riverberry Farm in Fairfax. This is in the Champlain Valley. And my other large research plot is at Maidstone Plant Farm. This is in Maidstone, Vermont, just outside of Guildhall, and this is in the upper Connecticut River Valley.
And so why the different locations?
The two different locations, they're on different sides of the Green Mountains, and so there may be some differences in just the pollinator communities. I also have this set up as a large, replicated research project so I can statistically analyze it and get some good scientific information out of it.
Okay, well, across the fence, stop by Riverberry Farm in Fairfax, where grower Jane Sorensen spoke about pollinators and Annie's research.
Every design choice you make can have an impact on the environment. It can be just simply beautiful for you, or it can also be beautiful for you and serve another function. And so why not serve another function, something that can be good for habitat, for wildlife, for pollinators. And so I'm trying to work on increasing what's available for people to buy. so that they can make choices, and I want them to be making informed choices. So that's why I'm putting together nice signage that show what the choices are and what the benefit would be of those choices.
What's the reaction been?
People have been really overwhelmingly excited and great about it. I send out an email to our email list, which is about 1,000 people who are on our list now, and educate them on that we've started introducing pollinator plants and that there's signage out there, and please look through them. And what you're trying to do is offer a full range of flowering from early in the season to the end of the season, of an overlapping of flowering, the range of colors that are a good choice for pollinators, flower shapes and types that you're trying to get to encourage a healthy population of pollinators. Pollinator population is absolutely critical for farmers, absolutely, especially a farm like ours, fruit and vegetables. All of our plants, almost all of our plants except for corn, which will be wind pollinated, is dependent upon pollinators. We do indeed barter. We pay a guy to come and keep honeybee hives here, which our honeybees are critical. We really kind of are wondering if the native bee population would be enough to provide all the pollination services that we need. But we would love to increase our habitat for the pollinators, for the native pollinators on our farm. We're really interested in learning the results. We really want to know conditionally right here too what's going on. We know what we want. We'd like to know what our population of pollinators is, and we also like the opportunity to educate. We've got the plot set up right behind the greenhouse with the door wide open at the end of the greenhouse, so customers can see the plot right there with the signage, and so it helps inform them also. So it's not just for us, but it's helping to spread the word to all our customers too.
So, Leonard, what are some tips for homeowners to make their landscapes more friendly to pollinators?
Okay, Annie's been great with that, with her landscape design background, so a lot of design tips, and actually set up at Maidstone a real nice display garden, and also full circle gardens in Essex. But a couple of pictures she provided too, to show this is the Maidstone garden there, and nesting boxes are one of the things you can use. Signage at different gardens, that's one of the things that we saw earlier in the video too. But here's a nesting box for for the bees. You can get them for butterflies and such. And planting in masses is one of the keys. Pollinators really prefer a mass of plants, not just one plant. So some other tips actually for friendly landscapes, in addition to planting masses and lots of flowers, is a diversity, of course, is picking our plants, and we were seeing earlier, blooming from early through late in the season, right up through now, like with the asters. Native plants, again, for those native pollinators. And then as far as gardening practices, you really want to minimize pesticide use, spray when the bees are not active. Dusk is a good time, but don't spray if you see bees out there. Leave some dead trees and branches around. That's where they like to nest. Don't just be total freak about cleaning everything up. Maybe out back somewhere, just leave a pile of rubbish. Brush pile, exactly. And then some water sources, just shallow water they have to drink too.
And so, Annie, where can viewers learn more about your research that you're doing?
I keep a website which has some information about my ongoing research and some results, as well as other resources, and that website is pollinatorgardens.org.
Excellent. And how about for you, Leonard?
And of course, my website, I've got some articles up there people can look at. Perry's Perennial pages at perrysperennials.info.
I was talking earlier, this is a really whole new way to look at a garden.
It really is, and I think, with the signage we saw earlier, I think just to think about the gardening and putting in plants, and if you want a neat landscape, but you want some wild plants, put it off out back, or if you're in case of mine and they get out of control, just leave it. And I'll tell people I'm gardening for the wildlife, it's for pollinators, and sure enough, between the goldenrod and asters, these things that have come in, they're just loaded with these, and we really are doing a good service for the environment and these things that we really need for, as we heard, for our food supply.
Absolutely. Now I'm all fired up for next year.
Good.
It's interesting and exciting research, and we're going to have you both back on the program when you have more results on what's best plants for pollinators. So thanks to both of you.
Look forward to it.
Thank you.
That's our program for today. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.
For a video copy of today's program, call toll-free 1-888-ATF-3430. Across the Fence is brought to you as a public service by University of Vermont Extension and WCAX-TV.